Thanks, Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly. This bill had to do with reducing the rates for a resident fishing license and hunting licenses for their current or retired National Guard members. Our committee, after much discussion, voted do not pass on this bill for the following reasons. We thought that if you're going to do something for the National Guard, it should be included for all National Guard. Only probably 50% of the people are hunt and fish. And the other reason was, if you're going to do this, we think it should come from this general fund. The North Dakota Game and Fish, for a lot of you, relies on special funds to finance their operation, which basically comes from sportsmen and from federal excise tax due to the sales of sporting goods like hunting, fishing rods, guns. So basically it's the sportsmen that support the North Dakota Game and Fish. And if this bill was enacted, it would severely reduce the income and the revenue that comes to the Game and Fish Department. And we had a peak of about 125,000 deer licenses in 2009. I believe last year it was around $35,000. So this greatly affects the operation of the North Dakota Game and Fish. So I would hope that you support the natural resources vote do not pass. Thank you.
Is there any discussion? Representative Silbernagle.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Assembly, as clearly articulated by the representative, this initially was put forward as a way to assist and aid the National Guard in their recruiting and their retention efforts. And if I could, for just a minute, I'd like to, before we vote, just give you another perspective on this bill that might be of interest to you. If you recall, during the Governor's State of the Union, or State of the State speech, the National Guard has mobilized nearly 7,000 soldiers and airmen since the attack on New York World Trade Center. Many of those National Guard members have had several deployments. Additionally, some of those Guard members were in the active Guard before that, so you kind of get the idea, over and back, over and back. I tried to get some numbers, some data to articulate that a little more clearly before today, but I just wasn't able to do that. Another piece of information that I'd like you to consider is, I think it was last week or the week before, in our appropriations subgroup meeting, we heard from the Department of Veterans Affairs. And in North Dakota, we have lost over 230 North Dakota veterans to suicide between 2001 and 2012. That does not include 2013 numbers. Finally, I'd like to just read you a couple of statistics from the North Dakota Military Data Book. And it's an estimated 1 in 4 of U.S. veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have reported symptoms of a mental disorder or cognitive condition. The second thing I'd like to just cover with you that's out of this pamphlet is 1 in 10 male inmates in North Dakota has some history of military service. So approximately 10% of our prison inmates are veterans. So what I'd like you to think about is when the stress and strain of life just gets a little overwhelming for us, one of the strategies we all like to employ is we head to the great outdoors. We grab a fishing rod, go try to catch a few fish, grab a shotgun, try to chase a pheasant, maybe a grouse, but you get the idea. This bill would encourage our Guard members to do what many of us do to maintain a very healthy mental outlook. If I have one regret in this bill, it is that I didn't stick to the original intent with no fees, 0 fees. Think of it. A National Guard member returns from a deployment, and he or she could hunt or fish hassle-free. You show your driver's license and your military ID, and you are good to go. Perhaps this bill might, in some small way, be a solution to our growing need for prison space, additional behavioral health spending, and it would also help solve some of the recruitment and retention issues. In summary, I stand in support of our National Guard members and ask that you do the same by voting yes on 1196.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly. I would hope that you would uphold the committee's recommendation for a do not pass. I don't think that anyone in that committee doesn't support the work of our National Guard and our citizen soldiers. They're called out in state of emergencies all the time. They leave their jobs, they leave their families, and they're called out to do that work. This program only affects probably 20% of the National Guard soldiers who would hunt and fish. Currently, our statewide average of individuals involved in hunting and fishing is about 20%. What do you tell the other 80%? What do you tell the veteran that served in Iraq in the regular army that doesn't get this treatment? This is only for a select few. It's only for a select crowd. The testimony in our committee against this bill was by 3 individuals, all of whom, two of the 3 would qualify and felt that this was not a necessary benefit for being in the National Guard. The 3rd individual was a Vietnam combat veteran who served his country in a war when it was very unpopular to do so, came home with no parade and no thanks, and was told to get a job. And that individual who did that service for our country would get nothing out of this. As a committee, or as a legislature, we are all about our soldiers. We are all about the work that they do. But think about other groups of people that also give a commitment of their life, that volunteer to, whether it's raising funds inside of their community to make sure that their civic center is funded. What about the volunteer ambulance providers that drop everything and go on that ambulance call in those communities? What about the volunteer fire department that when the alarm goes off and it's your house that's burning, they leave their job and they go? So there's a lot of individuals in this state that deserve the recognition that they may not be getting. And there's a lot of individuals in this state that deserve to have programs just like this one. This agency is funded solely on the sales of licenses. That is their only revenue source. Last session we raised those fees because we saw the trends in their ending fund balance. And we aren't done with that yet. Their ending fund balance is still showing deficit spending down to the level of the cap. So, Mr. Speaker, I would certainly hope that we continue as a state, as individuals, supporting all soldiers and everyone who volunteers and takes time out of their life to help someone else. This is not the way to do it. I would hope you'd uphold the committee's recommendation.
Further discussion, Representative Ammerman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the bill carrier yield to a question, please?
Representative Anderson, would you yield to a question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I will.
Representative Anderson, yes. Representative Ammerman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson, how did the Game and Fish testify on this?
You may continue.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Ammerman, they just basically came in and said it would be a severe reduction in their revenue source, and they're concerned about revenue.
If I could follow up with it, Mr. Speaker.
You may continue.
Thank you. Representative Anderson, so they were basically neutral, or did they oppose it?
Representative Anderson.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Ammerman, they were basically somewhat neutral. They were just concerned about the revenue end of it, as they, have limited a funding source.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion, Representative Silbernagel, second time.
Mr. Chairman, to the issues of the funding and the monies, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know there's a pretty significant cost to building one more cell block. And I would say that if we could offset one of those, we'd probably offset the cost of this program. Secondly, as to the issue of other military forces being a part of this, We could make this a pilot program. We could see how it works for a year or two, and if need be, we could expand it. But I say maybe it's time to think of this in a little different way. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1196. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Representative Onstead? The key will be closed and the clerk will take the record. The final vote shows 30 yea, 62 nay, 2 absent, not voting. House Bill 1196 is declared failed. The House will be on the